Power alone has never guaranteed lasting influence, and history keeps proving that the ones who rise the highest are not those who begin with control, but those who begin with clarity of purpose. When a nation, a leader, or even an individual starts with a deep understanding of why they exist, every decision becomes sharper, every action becomes intentional, and every sacrifice gains meaning. People do not give their energy to systems that simply demand obedience. They commit themselves to causes that give them a reason to believe. This is where real strength begins, not in authority, not in force, but in the ability to inspire something deeper than compliance. The countries that will shape the future are not the ones that try to dominate from the outside, but the ones that build conviction from within. Because when people believe in what they are part of, they stop working out of obligation and start contributing out of pride. That shift changes everything, because belief is scalable in a way power is not. You can impose rules, but you cannot impose passion. You can enforce structure, but you cannot force innovation. These things only emerge when individuals feel connected to a purpose that is bigger than themselves, something that gives meaning to their effort and direction to their struggle. And when that happens at a national level, the impact becomes unstoppable. Because millions of people begin moving not because they are told to, but because they want to. This is why starting with purpose creates a foundation that power alone can never replicate. Because power without purpose eventually creates resistance, while purpose naturally creates alignment. The strongest systems in the future will not be built on fear of consequences, but on clarity of mission, where people understand not just what they are doing, but why it matters. That understanding fuels resilience in difficult times, because when challenges come, and they always do, those who are driven only by power begin to fracture, while those driven by purpose become even more united. Purpose acts like a compass in uncertainty, guiding decisions when the path is unclear, while power often becomes reactive, trying to control outcomes instead of shaping them. And in a rapidly changing world, reaction is never enough. The nations and individuals who will lead are the ones who can stay grounded in their reason for moving forward, even when everything around them is shifting. Because purpose is not fragile, it does not collapse under pressure, it becomes stronger when tested. It creates a sense of identity that people protect, defend, and build upon. And that identity becomes the real source of influence, far beyond economic strength or military capability. When people feel that what they are part of truly matters, they bring their best ideas, their best energy, and their best commitment without being asked. That is how innovation accelerates, that is how cultures evolve, and that is how leadership expands beyond positions into movements. Starting with purpose is not a soft idea, it is the most strategic decision anyone can make, because it aligns vision with action and transforms effort into impact. Power may open doors, but purpose is what keeps them open, because in the end, people do not follow strength alone, they follow meaning. And those who provide that meaning will always stand ahead in a world that is constantly searching for something to believe in. Innovation is often misunderstood as a plan, a document, or a series of calculated steps written in boardrooms. But the truth is far more demanding and far more human. It is not something you design once and execute repeatedly. It is something you live every single day through the way people think, speak, challenge, and create. When innovation is treated as a strategy, it becomes rigid, confined to timelines and expectations. But when it becomes a culture, it turns into a living force that adapts, evolves, and grows stronger over time. The nations and organizations that will shape the future are not the ones with the most detailed innovation plans, but the ones where curiosity is encouraged, where questioning the norm is not punished, and where failure is not seen as an endpoint, but as a necessary step forward. Because real innovation does not come from comfort, it comes from tension, from the willingness to step into uncertainty without guarantees and still move forward with belief. In environments where people are afraid to speak up, afraid to challenge ideas, or afraid to fail, innovation suffocates before it even begins. But in cultures where trust exists, where individuals feel safe to express bold ideas without fear of judgment, something powerful starts to happen. Ideas begin to collide, perspectives expand, and solutions emerge that no single mind could have created alone. This is the difference between managing innovation and enabling it. One tries to control outcomes, the other creates conditions where outcomes can exceed expectations. The future will not be led by those who simply follow proven methods, because by the time something is proven, it is already being replaced by something better. The real leaders will be those who build systems where learning never stops, where adaptability becomes second nature, and where people are empowered to think beyond what currently exists. This requires a shift in mindset from protecting what works to exploring what could work better. It requires leaders who are willing to listen more than they speak, to ask questions instead of giving orders, and to create space for others to contribute in meaningful ways. Because innovation is not the responsibility of a few creative minds at the top, it is the collective energy of everyone within the system. When people feel ownership over their ideas, they invest more deeply, they push further, and they refuse to settle for average outcomes. This is how momentum builds, not through pressure, but through purpose-driven creativity that spreads across teams, industries, and entire nations. And when that kind of culture takes hold, it becomes impossible to replicate from the outside, because it is rooted in shared values, not external tactics. The countries that will dominate the future will not just adopt new technologies, they will continuously create them, refine them, and challenge them. They will not fear disruption, they will become the source of it. And this only happens when innovation is no longer treated as a project with a start and end, but as a mindset that shapes every decision, every interaction, and every ambition. Because in a world that is constantly changing, the greatest risk is not failure, it is standing still. And those who build cultures that embrace change, encourage exploration, and reward courage will always move ahead of those who wait for certainty. Because innovation does not wait for permission, it responds to belief. And the environments that nurture that belief will define what the future looks like. Leadership is often mistaken for position, authority, or the power that comes with a title. But the reality is far more demanding and far more human. Titles can command attention for a moment, but they cannot command commitment over time. Real leadership begins where authority ends, in the space where people choose to follow not because they are required to, but because they trust the person guiding them. And trust is not given automatically, it is built slowly through consistency, honesty, and the courage to act with integrity even when it is difficult. When leaders rely only on their titles, they create compliance, but compliance is fragile and temporary. The moment pressure increases or circumstances change, that compliance begins to fade. Trust, on the other hand, creates something much stronger. It creates loyalty, resilience, and a willingness in people to go beyond what is expected, because they believe in who they are following and what they are building together. This is why the leaders who leave the greatest impact are not the ones who held the highest positions, but the ones who earned the deepest trust. Trust is built in the small moments that most people overlook, in the way leaders listen when no one is watching, in the way they respond to mistakes, and in the way they give credit instead of taking it. It is built when people feel seen, heard, and valued, not as resources to be used, but as individuals with ideas and potential. When that environment exists, people do not hold back. They contribute openly, they challenge respectfully, and they take ownership of outcomes because they feel connected to the mission. This kind of environment cannot be forced through authority. It must be nurtured through behavior. Leaders who understand this do not focus on controlling every action. They focus on creating clarity and alignment so that people can move forward with confidence. They understand that leadership is not about being the smartest person in the room. It is about making the room smarter by empowering others to think, to grow, and to lead in their own capacity. In times of uncertainty, the difference between title-based leadership and trust-based leadership becomes even more visible. When challenges arise, people do not look at titles for direction, they look for leaders they believe in. They look for consistency, for honesty, and for someone who will stand with them rather than above them. Trust becomes the anchor that keeps teams together when everything else feels unstable. Without it, even the most well-structured systems begin to break down, because fear replaces confidence and hesitation replaces action. But when trust is present, people remain focused, adaptable, and willing to face challenges together because they know they are not alone in the process. The future will belong to those who understand that leadership is not about control, it is about connection. It is about creating an environment where people feel safe enough to take risks, strong enough to overcome setbacks, and inspired enough to keep moving forward even when the path is unclear. Titles may open doors, but they do not keep people inside. Trust is what sustains momentum, what drives collaboration, and what turns groups into unified forces capable of achieving far more than any individual could alone. And as the world continues to evolve, the leaders who will stand out are not the ones who demand respect through their position, but the ones who earn it through their actions. Because in the end, people do not follow titles, they follow those they trust. And that trust becomes the true source of lasting influence, and meaningful impact. Progress is often measured in concrete and steel, in skylines that rise higher and roads that stretch farther. But the true measure of a nation's strength has never been what it builds, it has always been who it builds. Infrastructure can support growth, but it cannot create it on its own. Roads do not innovate, buildings do not solve problems, and technology does not move forward without people who are willing and able to push it beyond its limits. When investment is focused only on physical development, it creates an illusion of progress, something visible, something impressive, but often something hollow if the human potential behind it is left undeveloped. Because without skilled, inspired, and empowered individuals, even the most advanced systems remain underutilized, underperforming, and eventually outdated. The nations that will truly lead the future understand that people are not a secondary priority, they are the foundation of everything. Education becomes more than a system, it becomes a mission to unlock thinking, creativity, and confidence. Training becomes more than preparation, it becomes continuous growth that adapts with the changing world. When individuals are given access to knowledge, when they are encouraged to question, to experiment, and to improve, they begin to see themselves not just as participants in a system, but as contributors to something larger. That shift changes how they approach their work, their challenges, and their opportunities. They stop waiting for direction and start creating direction. They stop settling for existing solutions and start building better ones. Investing in people also means recognizing that potential is not limited to a select few. It exists everywhere, in every community, in every background, in every individual who has the chance to be seen and supported. When systems are designed to include rather than exclude, the pool of ideas expands, perspectives become richer, and solutions become more resilient. Diversity of thought is not just a social value, it is a strategic advantage, because the more ways a problem can be understood, the more effectively it can be solved. And when people feel that they belong, that their contributions matter, their level of commitment increases in ways that no policy or incentive alone can achieve. There is also a deeper layer to this investment, one that goes beyond skills and knowledge. It is the investment in confidence and mindset and in the belief that individuals can grow beyond their current circumstances. Because when people believe in their ability to improve, they take initiative, they embrace challenges, and they persist through difficulty. This internal shift cannot be built with physical structures. It must be cultivated through environments that encourage growth rather than punish failure. When mistakes are treated as learning opportunities rather than reasons for rejection, people become more willing to take the kind of risks that lead to breakthrough ideas. Infrastructure will always be important. It creates the framework within which societies operate, but it is people who bring that framework to life. It is their ideas that fill the buildings, their skills that power the systems, and their vision that drives progress forward. Without them, even the most advanced infrastructure stands still. With them, even limited resources can be transformed into extraordinary outcomes. The future will not be shaped by what is built alone, but by who is empowered to build, adapt, and lead within it. Because when people are placed at the center of progress, everything else begins to move with purpose, direction, and unstoppable momentum. The world no longer rewards those who simply reach a position of strength and try to hold on to it. It rewards those who can evolve, adjust, and move forward no matter how often the rules change. What once worked for decades can now become irrelevant in a matter of years, sometimes even months. And in this kind of environment, stability is no longer about staying the same, it is about staying responsive. Adaptability is not just a skill to have on the side, it has become the core capability that determines whether individuals, organizations, and nations continue to grow or slowly fade into irrelevance. Because change is no longer an event, it is a constant. And those who treat it as something temporary will always be caught unprepared when the next shift arrives. At its core, adaptability is about mindset before it is about action. It begins with the willingness to accept that what you know today may not be enough tomorrow, and that holding too tightly to past success can become the very thing that limits future growth. This is where many struggle, because success creates comfort, and comfort creates resistance. When something has worked well, there's a natural tendency to protect it, to defend it, and to build systems around it that make it harder to change. But the reality is that every system, no matter how effective it once was, has a lifespan. And those who recognize this early, who are willing to question even their strongest strategies, position themselves ahead of those who wait until change is forced upon them. Adaptability also requires the courage to move without complete certainty. There are no perfect conditions for change, no moment when all risks disappear and every outcome is guaranteed. Waiting for that moment often means waiting forever. The ones who move forward are those who are willing to take informed risks, to experiment, to test new approaches, and to learn quickly from what does not work. Failure in this context is not a setback, it is feedback. It is information that guides the next step, refines the next idea, and strengthens the next attempt. When this perspective becomes part of a culture, people stop fearing mistakes and start using them as tools for progress. Another critical element of adaptability is speed of learning. In a fast-changing world, it is not the one who knows the most that leads. It is the one who can learn the fastest and apply that knowledge effectively. This means staying curious, staying open, and constantly seeking new perspectives. It means listening to different viewpoints, exploring new technologies, and being willing to update your understanding even when it challenges your previous beliefs. The ability to unlearn and relearn becomes just as important as the ability to learn in the first place. Adaptability is also deeply connected to resilience. Change often brings uncertainty, and uncertainty can create pressure. Those who are adaptable do not avoid that pressure. They develop the capacity to move through it. They remain focused, flexible, and solution-oriented even when the path ahead is unclear. This kind of resilience is not built overnight. It is developed through repeated exposure to challenges and the decision to keep moving forward each time. The future will not belong to those who try to predict every outcome. It will belong to those who are prepared to respond to any outcome. Because no matter how much planning is done, there will always be variables that cannot be controlled. Adaptability becomes the bridge between intention and reality, allowing progress to continue even when conditions shift unexpectedly. It transforms uncertainty from a barrier into an opportunity, from something to fear into something to explore. And in a world where change is the only constant, those who embrace adaptability will not just survive, they will continue to lead, grow, and shape what comes next, because they are not defined by where they start or what they have. They are defined by how effectively they can evolve when everything around them begins to change. Unity is often spoken about as an ideal, something that sounds powerful but feels difficult to achieve, yet it remains one of the most practical and transformative forces any group, nation, or movement can experience. When people move in different directions, even the strongest efforts begin to cancel each other out. Energy gets scattered, progress slows, and frustration grows. But when people align around a shared vision, something remarkable happens. Individual effort no longer feels isolated. It becomes part of a larger force that multiplies its impact. Momentum is not created by isolated actions. It is created by coordinated belief, by individuals who understand where they are going and why it matters, and who are willing to move forward together even when the path is uncertain. This kind of unity does not happen by accident. It is built intentionally through trust, communication, and a clear sense of purpose that people can connect to. Without clarity, unity turns into confusion, because people may be working hard but not in the same direction. Without trust, unity turns into hesitation, because individuals hold back, unsure of whether others will follow through. But when clarity and trust are present, alignment begins to form naturally. People start to see how their roles contribute to something larger. They begin to understand how their efforts connect with others, and that understanding creates a sense of responsibility that goes beyond individual success. It becomes about collective progress, about ensuring that everyone moves forward together rather than competing for recognition or control. Unity also requires the ability to embrace differences rather than eliminate them. It is not about making everyone think the same way. It is about bringing different perspectives into alignment around a shared goal. Diversity of thought, background, and experience strengthens unity when it is guided by a common direction, because it allows challenges to be approached from multiple angles. This leads to better decisions, stronger solutions, and a more resilient path forward. When people feel that their voices are valued, they engage more deeply, they contribute more openly, and they become more invested in the outcome. This level of engagement cannot be forced. It must be earned through an environment that respects individuality while reinforcing collective purpose. As unity grows, so does momentum, and momentum has a unique power. It makes progress feel easier, faster, and more sustainable. What once required intense effort begins to flow more naturally because people are no longer pushing against each other, they are pushing forward together. This creates a cycle where progress fuels belief, belief fuels action, and action fuels even greater progress. Over time, this cycle becomes self-sustaining because the group no longer relies on constant external motivation. It generates its own energy from within. This is when momentum becomes truly unstoppable, not because challenges disappear, but because the collective strength of the group becomes greater than any obstacle it faces. Unity also plays a critical role in times of difficulty. When pressure increases and uncertainty rises, groups that lack unity begin to fracture, individuals retreat into self-interest, and progress stalls. But groups that are unified respond differently. They come closer together, they support one another, and they remain focused on the shared goal. This resilience allows them to navigate challenges more effectively, to adapt without losing direction, and to maintain forward movement even when conditions are not ideal. It is in these moments that unity proves its true value, not as a concept, but as a practical force that sustains progress when it matters most. The future will be shaped by those who understand that success is not just about individual capability, it is about collective alignment. It is about creating environments where people are connected by purpose, strengthened by trust, and driven by a shared commitment to move forward together. Because when unity is present, effort is amplified, progress accelerates, and the impossible begins to feel within reach. And that is where true momentum is created. Not in isolated bursts of action, but in the continuous aligned movement of people who believe in the same direction and refuse to move apart as they build something greater than themselves together.